You're listening to Scribble Talk Tech Leaders Podcast, a new series for business winning professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundram, and I'll be sitting down with our entrepreneurs who are building incredible companies to share their stories, discuss their entrepreneurship journey, and learn how they are making a positive impact in the world. Today's guest is Kyle Racki. Kyle is the chief exec and co-founder of Proposify, a software that helps thousands of businesses remove the bottleneck hurdles and get more visibility into the close. Based in Halifax, Canada, Kyle and Proposify team have won multiple awards over the years, including the Ernst & Young Tech Entrepreneur of the Year for Atlantic Canada and Deloitte Fast 50. In addition to running Proposify, Kyle also works with other companies and startups as an investor and strategic coach and sits on the board of Bright and MarsVR. He also co-hosts a weekly business podcast, the Racki Symes Podcast. There's a lot to talk about. Welcome, Kyle, to Scribble Talk.
Thank you for having me.
Kyle, let's go back to the very beginning. Let's talk about where were you born and your school and early life.
Sure. So I live in a little corner of the world, which you alluded to, Halifax, Nova Scotia. Mm-hmm. We are on the east coast of Canada, so kind of a short flight to Boston. I grew up in a little town called Cole Harbour in Nova Scotia, which is actually where the hockey player Sidney Crosby is from. So if people are curious where that is. But I had a pretty, mostly unremarkable upbringing, I guess. I wasn't raised in an entrepreneurial household or anything like that. My parents were, my mother was a nurse and my father was sort of a blue collar maintenance, worker, handyman. And that was kind of how I grew up. Now, I did grow up in a very sort of high control religious environment, which I think helped it was part of my evolution into who I am today because, we did a lot of door-to-door preaching and public speaking training and that kind of thing. So even though I left this religion later on in my life, it did, I think, help me get used to the idea of rejection and putting myself out there and, doing hard things that I didn't feel like doing, which I think you need a lot of when you're an entrepreneur.
Wow, very early on, and that's beautiful. And other than, any childhood memories of growing up, schools?
I was never that gifted when it came to school. I always sort of fancied myself more of a creative type. So I was into drawing a lot when I was younger and got into music when I was around, 12, 13, started playing guitar and started playing in bands. And so I always kind of thought I would be doing something creative, like I wanted to be an author, or I wanted to be later on, I wanted to be like a digital animator, make video games, maybe that kind of thing. That led me to graphic design, which I fell in love with, and then later web design and then programming. And then I started to get into, the web and building websites and building applications. So that's kind of what led me to then starting an agency, design development agency, which I ran for 5 years. And then, then later Proposify. So it was kind of a different path, I think, maybe than some. I was never like a born entrepreneur or hustler, like, if you had told me back then that I'd, be a CEO of a tech company, that wouldn't make sense to me.
As a 13-year-old playing guitar to Kyle Racki as chief executive of Proposify, how do you see your journey so far?
I love what I do. I think, in hindsight or looking back, like it makes perfect sense. It wouldn't have at the time, but I think entrepreneurs have to have a certain genetic makeup, if you will, or personality makeup that lends itself well to me and kind of what I do. I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. And I really respect the people that go out and try it and build a startup, build a consulting company. Sometimes after 5 or 10 years, they get worn out and they want to take a job somewhere and go work for somebody else. I respect that they've tried it. Then I think other people it's what they're meant to do. And they couldn't do anything else. And I kind of, and now at this point, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24. I'm almost 40. It's now the majority of my career. So I don't actually think I could do anything else.
Nice, Kyle. And as a young boy playing guitar, I know you still play in the band, and I see the guitar just behind you. I wish I would have given you advance warning to play some, but that's nice. So, how was it to? How was it? That's nice. Thank you for adjusting the camera so we can have a view. Beautiful. So, how was it? Bring on one end you have passion in music, and talk us through about graphic design. And do you remember the very first graphics that you created before? And talk us through about bringing, moving away from freelance graphics into agency. Maybe that would be an interesting start for us.
Yeah. Well, when I was in high school, there was a digital art class that was fairly new, I think, because it was the late 90s, early 2000s. They had this digital art class where you did like 3D animation and Photoshop and that kind of thing. And I really loved it. In fact, I got like 97% in those classes, whereas I got, 60, 70, maybe 80 in every other class. So I kind of thought, okay, this is probably the thing I should be doing. When I found out about graphic design, I went to the Nova Scotia Community College and took the program there. They had an applied communication arts program, which included photography and graphic design and illustration. Loved all that stuff. I loved the creative process. And I loved sort of the marriage between that and commerce. So I always loved the idea of like using design and using art as a way to sell, which is essentially, what being a designer within an agency or within a marketing firm really is. You're applying your creativity to solving business problems. So I always loved that. And early in my career, in my early 20s, that's kind of what I thought I would be, was like an art director or a creative director at like an advertising agency. But then, as the web was really, still quite new at that time, or people were still trying to figure out how to use it. I became fascinated with the idea of programming and of making interactive experiences. I was never I was never good at math, but in an applied sense, if you can turn like logic and, sort of complex equations into like an actual thing you can sort of see and touch, that really fascinated me. Now, eventually after working in a couple of agencies, I just wanted to do it myself. Like I didn't enjoy working for other people. I kind of felt like they were a middleman between me and the client. So if I could just get my own clients, then I wouldn't have to, work for these people who ran agencies. Right. That was sort of the genesis of then going out on my own and being a freelancer for a bit until I partnered with my now co-founder of 15 years, Kevin Springer, and we started the agency together. That was my first introduction to business, and I knew nothing about it. So it was all completely learned on the job.
At the age of 24, starting your own company, but I'm glad that you had your co-founder next to you, which is a blessing. How did you meet your co-founder?
Well, he and I worked at an agency before. The last place that I worked before I went on my own, I had met Kevin there, and we're sort of like a little bit like the odd couple. He's 20 years my senior. He is American. He lived in Boston and Florida and kind of lived around for a while for different places. He also had a very diverse background in terms of he owned a bar in Maine. He started a coffee company in Florida. He was very much like a born entrepreneur. And it was only when he moved back he sort of moved with his wife to Nova Scotia, where she's from here, that he took a job. It was, I think, his first desk job ever. So, he was still very much an entrepreneur. He was just kind of at that point in time, just earning a paycheck. But I knew that he had that itch within him to go out and start something. So he coached me quite a bit in the course of us working together on like how to sell. And I told him about this proposal app idea that he was very much supportive of, even as back as far as like 2007, that kind of era. He was very much in support, and I may not have gone out without his coaching and his support, but few months after finding success as a freelancer, I just invited him. Why don't you just come with me and we'll just start something together?
Nice. And as they say, rest is history, and that's beautiful. And Proposify, I mean, like, you are running a digital agency that's doing really well. Digital agency marketing to Proposify, solving problems there. Talk us, what was that trigger point?
Well, I had for a very long time been thinking about proposal software as a thing. It wasn't really a category of software much when I was looking at it. There was one company that was doing it. There might have been enterprise solutions, but it wasn't really a thing. And I always just thought, working in agencies and then running my own, we always had to put out proposals to win work. We always had to, create a document that communicated our value, that was very much a one-to-one type of document. So it wasn't a document that you put out for everybody. It was specific to this one prospect that you were selling to, with case studies or work samples that were specific to trying to win this client. And I always loved this. I was always fascinated with this idea of a visually engaging document that wins you a big deal. That has a high price tag associated with it. But the process of creating them has always been so cumbersome for most companies. It always involves maybe multiple people, tracking down work, tracking down content. Sometimes that content gets out of date. And so what most companies always did was find the last Word document that was sent to a prospect, copy it, find and replace, copy from other documents. That's how most companies still put out proposals today. And there's a lot of pain associated with it. I never really met anybody who says, I love to create proposals, but everybody loves to close deals and everybody loves to win new business. It's just that the process of getting a document to a client, getting them to sign off on it is painful. So I was very fascinated with this problem and thought about it for a long time and thought about how software could make it easier. But it wasn't until we were really a few years into running the agency that we started to get serious about it, because running an agency is hard, especially if it's your first business. It's a very difficult. Service businesses are inherently very difficult to run because they can't scale without humans, behind them. You're essentially trying to figure out how to sell hours. And then in order to sell more, you need more, human hours to sell. So it's always just inherently a very difficult business to scale. And frankly, we weren't all that good at running an agency. We weren't super profitable. It was often feast or famine. Kevin and I never really made a lot of money from it. It was always just kind of something we did. So we were looking at getting into a product business, and SaaS was always something we wanted to do. And we tried out a few different ideas within the agency. But the more we talked to people and about proposal software and about the process of proposals, the more it became just evident that, hey, somebody needs to solve this problem, and maybe we're the people to do it.
Brilliant. And what a start to the story. And that was a priority when you began, and it's been a few years now, close to 10 years at least. How has the priority developed? And from the time you started, where you're solving this business problem, when did you say, okay, now we have nailed it, and now let's go and add these little other value-added elements towards our software that gives us even more better experience? Talk us through your priorities from the start to where it is now.
There was a certain point where we kind of knew we had to go all in for Proposify to be a success. We had started building it within our agency as a side project, but I think as many agencies have learned that if you're trying to build a product company within your agency, it's very difficult without some kind of separation in the businesses. Have one individual or one team work on this thing and leave them alone, put them in isolation. Don't let them mix with the agency, because inherently clients are going to come knocking with, hey, we need this done. And it's going to be very hard to pass up paying client work when you've got a product that's still sort of half baked and you're just trying to figure it out. So we one of the catalysts that really changed things for us was we hired a developer who was dedicated to working on Proposify within our agency, but he wasn't to work on any client work. And it was primarily me and him. His name was Jonathan, working together. Kevin was trying to keep business flowing into the agency. We were actually in the process of trying to sell the agency because we both were really just, we needed to do something else. It was a really stressful business to run. And then, we tried to sell it a couple of times and deals fell through. And then finally, we found somebody who more or less took it off our hands. And we didn't really walk away with any cash from it. It was more of like, here's the keys, take it, it's yours. And we had this product with like 10 customers that we didn't really have recurring revenue. So it wasn't a soft landing. And I think that's probably the thing that holds a lot of people back from going out and starting businesses is they go, well, I'll do it when the circumstances are easier, or when I have like a big cash cushion to sit on that, I've got a lot of stability. But I think I've never started a business where conditions were right. The conditions were always unfavorable. And I think that that's probably the difference between, career entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs is like the entrepreneurs are waiting for when it's going to be easy, and the entrepreneurs just do it anyway. So Kevin and I tried to raise money for Proposify a couple of times and got turned down, mainly because we were running an agency and we didn't have any proven product market fit. We just took the approach that we're just going to do it anyway. We don't need anyone's approval. We don't need anybody to like say yes to us and invest. We're just going to try to figure out how to do it. And then, the stars kind of aligned around May of 2014 because this group of investors that we had been pitching to said yes to a $250,000 seed investment, which by today's standards is very, very small. And kind of around the same month that person took our agency away from us and more or less like took the liability away. And so now suddenly we were freed up with about 10 months or so of cash between paying the developers and all that kind of stuff and paying ourselves a salary. Like we didn't have a lot of cushion, but we had about 10 months to kind of make it or break it type of thing. And we really just put our heads down for that 10-month period and really focused on how can we achieve product market fit? Because we had the market piece figured out. We were solving a valuable problem and we knew how to market because we ran a digital marketing agency. So we knew how to get like traffic and signups, but we just couldn't get them to convert within their trial, or if they did, we couldn't get them to stay longer than a month or two. So it wasn't until product market fit started clicking around September, October, and we knew, hey, we've maybe got 4 or 5 months of cash left in the bank. Something changed and suddenly our monthly recurring revenue started to grow. And started to double every month. And we went from, under $1,000 in revenue to 2,000 to 4,000 to 8,000. And things just started doubling and doubling and doubling. And we were like, what's going on here? Like, what are we doing? And it was really just, we had found product market fit with the group. Yeah. We started to find product market fit. We started to scale. And that was a very exciting time because now we were suddenly had a business that we could predictably grow our revenue, reinvest profit back into hiring additional people. And for a long time, we didn't even really want to raise or look at raising more investment capital because we thought, well, it's already growing and we already know kind of who we need to hire. And we're not really going to, it's just, there's a lot of traditional wisdom, if you will, from like investors or from the tech community of like raise money when you don't need it and when things are going really well. And that makes sense. But I think we were a bit stubborn, maybe based on our traditional business, history of not wanting to rely on investors to fuel growth and wanting to have a profitable business. So I realized I probably went way longer and more detail than you had asked, but that was kind of what the journey looked like.
It's beautiful. I mean, because everybody starts somewhere, as you rightly said. I'm glad that the agency, you were able to dispose the agency at the right time on one, and you got the funding on the other side, and it all happened. Thank you for sharing in a much detailed way, because that's it. As a multiple business owner myself, you're right. I think when we structure our own data company, or we are positioning our spin-off at the moment, I face exactly the same challenge as you're currently facing, Kai. And it's just to let go what you have. And then how are you going to justify it to your investors that you're going to give 100% to this new company rather than you just do it? But that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure this is an easy question. So did you decide to establish your company where you are based, Nova Scotia, just because you and Kevin are there, or was there any other reasons?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I think growing up in a place like this, especially, where I grew up here, Kevin didn't grow up here. There's a very much a mentality of where like I think they used to call us the have-not province. So it's not a big city or province. There's not a lot of people here, and a lot of young people go to university here and then move away to find jobs, because historically there have not been jobs here.
Yes.
And so you do tend to grow up with this idea of like people in bigger cities are better and smarter than us. We can't do it because we're in Nova Scotia. That's changed quite a bit in the last few years. And in fact, Halifax is now the second fastest growing city in Canada.
Nice.
But at the time, we just thought, I think because Kevin wasn't from here, and also I had done some traveling to places like Boston and San Francisco. And that was an eye-opening experience, because I kind of got to meet people, and I just thought, hey, these people are no better than me. Like, maybe there's access to more resources or more community or bigger companies, but like there's smart people everywhere. It does not matter where you come from. There's going to be smart people. So, we started it here, and really, it was a function of I lived here, my family's here, I didn't want to uproot my kids and move somewhere else. But the other thing was there was a lot of talented people here, and we wanted to have like a very much an in-office culture with like, a nice place for people to come to. And we attracted a lot of the best talent from here because it wasn't a big city. And because as we started to find success and grow, we became somewhat of like the startup darlings of Halifax by function of the fact that, there wasn't a lot of SaaS companies or tech companies here. So we attracted, among the best talent in the city. And now everything changed when COVID happened. We shut down our office, and suddenly the whole in-person culture, which was very, very paramount to our success, I think, was no longer an advantage. And then it became more advantageous to hire from outside. So even as it is today, a significant amount of our workforce is in Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and in some cases, other places, Brazil, or we have an employee in the Philippines. So, we're headquartered in Halifax, but really a lot of us are not here anymore.
Nice. Thank you. And at the moment, you have close to 70 plus employees, right, Kai? 80
about that, 65, 70.
65, 70. Again, initially it was you and Kevin, and then you might have few developers, but gradually as you kind of build up 10 to 20, 20 to 30, you might need to put forward some structure around what could be the right people. And, talk us through about is there any selection process that you have, formal, informal, in your company?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The people that you hire will be the differentiating factor in whether or not you succeed as a company. Probably the hardest thing to learn as a founder, and I think people listening to this may hear it and still not really absorb it until maybe they feel the pain themselves. But and I see this a lot coaching other founders or working with other startups, is that there's this initial group that if you find success and you find traction and your startup starts to take off, you build such a close bond with the people who helped you get there.
Nice.
Your first hire, your first engineer, your first marketer, salesperson, whoever that is. The hardest pill to swallow, and the thing that most people won't do, and they'll only realize maybe 2 years down the line that it's too late, is that founding group is probably not going to help you get to the next level. And you have to make hard choices. That can include hiring somebody else above those people. You know, that's probably the smartest thing to do, and the thing that I would do if I had to do it again. But the reason most can't do that is because they over promote too early. So the person who was like their founding engineer or product person becomes CTO or CPO. And as soon as you make that title change, because it's very easy to hand out titles early on when you're a startup, it doesn't cost you anything to say, yeah, sure, you're great. You're a great developer. You can be the CTO. The skills required to be that role as a company starts to scale are very different. Yes. And so then you have to have difficult conversations to say, I don't think you're a CTO, or you might be one day, but you're not who we need right now. And that can either mean you need to exit the business, or we need to find somebody over you, which means we have to give you a title change and demote you essentially. And that alone, probably one of the most important things for founders to do, but also the hard thing to do. And the thing that they probably won't do until they're already they're already hurting.
Nice. I think you're right. I think the company which is 0 to 9 or 10 to the company that's to say 11 to 25 to say 26 to 100. I think there is enough kind of surveys that has happened to just say you need to reinvent or restart the company every time you hit a certain threshold. And you kind of beautifully said that. Thank you. And
the same thing, by the way, is true of CEOs, right? If you take on the CEO title in your startup, which you probably should, or one of the founders should take on, the skills required to be a startup CEO and a scaling CEO are two very different things.
Yes.
And it requires a lot of development, a lot of personal work, a lot of coaching, a lot of development to become the CEO that's required at, say, a 10 million a year company or a 1 million a year company versus a $0 or, $1,000 a year company. Very different skills, because what helps you get that first initial traction is you and your own smarts as a founder. You put in the work, you have the ambition and the drive and the focus and the perseverance, and you solve problems. You get out there and you market and you sell and you code and you ship and you do it all. You talk to customers, you do everything. The hardest transition to make is to be the person who can describe and articulate the vision for where the company is going and the direction it's going and what's important and what doesn't matter and what does matter, to clarify and articulate what are our core values as a company, what's our purpose for being, what's our mission, what are we going after, and then hire the best people and promote the best people who reflect your core values to figure out the hard things.
Yes.
So it's a big thing that I notice in early founders who are finding success, is that they really struggle with this idea of like, it's not about you anymore. The problem, if there's a problem in the business, they think, how can I figure it out? They think it's up to them to figure out everything. It's like, no, it's not. It's on you to go and hire the best people to figure that thing out. Nice. Always a who, not a how.
Yeah.
Somebody in the world can solve this problem, right? Do we agree that? Okay. And most of the time I say, well, even the people you hire, if they're not there yet, or if they're too inexperienced, they'll look at, say, like a scaling engineering challenge or a marketing challenge or a sales challenge as being like, well, I don't think it can be done. Yeah. And you're like, well, do you think somebody in the world could do this? Like, because Google has experienced probably the same challenge, right? Facebook, Apple, like they've scaled. Somebody has had to figure this problem out before, right? So it isn't this problem can't be solved. It's that somebody knows how to solve it. It's just not you, and it's not me.
That's it. 100% right. That's amazing. So initially you said, it's a word of mouth and you started your own business, but gradually when the company started to grow, what are the strategies that you implemented to market the business predominantly inside Canada and also outside globally?
So we never had a geographic focus other than we're English speaking. So any country that, that speaks English, people could buy from us. So we found that Europe, Australia, the US were the best markets. US makes up 50% or more of our customer base. Australia is probably our second biggest. And then Europe. Canada is actually fourth or fifth.
Wow.
It's not a huge market for us. But I mean, there's 30-ish million people in Canada. That's about how many people fit inside California. So Canada is just geographically large, but very, very small in population compared to the US. What has worked for us has been really, or at least what got us initial traction, got us to $1 million in revenue and beyond, has been the focus on industry. So a lesson that I learned, sorry, there's a bit of noise coming from somewhere. Hopefully you don't hear it. The focus that we had in the early days was really based on a lesson that I learned running an agency, which was like, when you run, say, a web design company or a marketing company, you don't want to be marketing for all. You really want to be marketing for a specific niche audience. Right. Because if you're going to buy, somebody I know once used this analogy with me of like, if you are, let's say, an ad agency and you just won the contract for, say, Ferrari or Porsche, and you need to go hire a photographer to take pictures of these cars for an ad. Are you going to hire the person who does weddings and portraits and nature? Or are you going to hire the car guy or girl? You're going to hire the person who shoots cars.
Right.
And their whole portfolio is high-end luxury cars. It's the same with any business, really. And I learned from our difficulty scaling an agency was that you don't want to be web design for all or marketing for all. You want to be, if you're actually going to scale, it's going to be by being very niche and very focused. And so I learned that with Proposify. In the early days, especially in the first few years of the company, we actually didn't market ourselves as proposal software for all. We were proposal software for digital agencies.
Nice.
And only because we definitely knew that market had the pain that we solve. We experienced that pain firsthand, and we could also create content for those people. From a marketing perspective, it was easier to draw them in because they were already very active online. They adopted new tools quite easily. We knew what conferences they went to, what books they read, what influencers. So marketing to digital agency owners was like shooting fish in a barrel. Like they're there. And I would recommend that approach really to everybody. In fact, usually when things get hard as your business scales is because you're taking on too many opportunities and you're saying yes to too many things. The old adage, your businesses don't die of starvation, they die of indigestion. It's usually because they're doing too many things and they're not focused. And most of the time when a transformation needs to happen within a scaling organization, it's by saying, what are we the best in the world at, for who, and what problem do we solve and for who, and what's the value of solving it?
Nice.
And when you can get really crystal clear on that, it makes everything a whole lot easier. Now, instead of building a product for 20 different industries, we just build it for one.
Right.
Instead of marketing to everybody, we get really super clear on one group and we just go after them. It doesn't mean that you won't take on other customers who want to buy, but it just means you're intentional about how you go to market.
Nice. Over the years, you might have had a lot of customers. You still have a lot of customers. But what's the best compliment you have received so far, Kyle?
Oh, that's a tough one. The best compliment I've received.
Or the most memorable compliment that you are really proud of?
People are always, people are often very complimentary, but I find maybe it's a function of being a business owner or an entrepreneur that you tend to not get too wrapped up in stopping to smell the roses. You're often, as soon as you hit a goal, you kind of look to the next one instead of looking at how far you came. So
exactly. I think that's so true. I think even when somebody gives you a compliment, we don't really take that wholeheartedly. We just say, thank you. And just to move on. Well, that's great. I think we talked a lot about your entrepreneurship. Let's just talk a little bit about, or a lot more about you. I mean, as we kind of enter, you have a busy schedule day to day. Is there any kind of structure that you follow on a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, daily basis, etc.? How do you adapt yourself?
Yeah, I mean, my structure sort of changes, I guess, depending on the phase of life that I'm in, because I have young children again. So I had two kids who are, now 10 and 15, but I also have two new ones who are, 3 years old and 7 months. So I find I get up earlier. Back when I was in my 20s and starting my first business, I did a lot of late nights and stayed up till 4 a.m. working and that kind of thing. It's pretty much shifted. So now if I want to get a lot of quiet focus work done, it's going to be usually early in the mornings when I get up. But yeah, I mean, my schedule is pretty normal. I try to get to the gym most days or out for a run to take care of health. Also something that a lot of people don't do in the early years of starting a company. They kind of focus so much on their business. They don't take care of themselves. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of, I try to schedule my meetings for like the afternoon to keep the mornings fairly free for focus time and for gym time. But nice. I think that's really important because as you start to grow a business and as you start to evolve into that CEO that I spoke of, who's really more about the where we're going and why we exist and being that kind of CEO, you actually shouldn't have your schedule packed all the time with meetings. It's something we always assume every CEO is busy. I mean, I read that Reed Hastings from Netflix has a really open calendar. He doesn't overschedule himself because you need that time to have those impromptu meetings to walk over and talk to somebody and see how some work's being done. If you read Andy Grove's High Output Management, he talks about that a lot. Having time to reflect and time to really just think. If you get so focused on being in the weeds and being, in the execution mode as a CEO, you can really lose the long game because you should be spending a lot of your time thinking about what we need to be next year and 3 years and 10 years from now, not just what we're doing today.
Well said. That's a powerful message. Thank you, Kyle. Kyle, as we move into the informal thing, talk us about your hobbies and interests, especially your band, the Club Sunday.
Yeah, well, as I said, I was very into music growing up and playing and performing. And, I did a bit of that as a teenager. Life gets busy, especially when you run a business and have a family. So you don't have as much time for it. But during COVID, I kind of reunited with an old school friend who talked about playing bass and playing with me. And then I just started to think, and I recommend this as a really good exercise for anyone to do. It might sound hokey to some people, but if you have like a vision board or something that is like your why, like what do you want out of your life at the end of the day, or where do you want to be in 20 years? It's helpful to sometimes write things down or to put like pictures in place of like, this is where I want my life to go as your aspiration. And when I did that exercise, I found myself putting pictures of, performers or playing in a band or recording.
Oh.
And I thought I would hate to be on my deathbed and saying like, I wish I started a band. I enjoy that. I enjoy playing and I enjoy performing. Is it a career? Is it something I'll ever make money doing? Absolutely not. Chances of being successful in it is virtually zero, even less than starting a business or a startup. But I enjoy it. So I found people that I enjoyed playing music with who also really loved, the various decades and genres that existed in those decades, especially 80s and 90s. New wave and shoegaze and post-punk and those types of genres that you don't see a lot of today. And so we started to write and record. And within a year now of being a band, Club Sundays, we've got 12 songs written and recorded. We've got 5 singles on Spotify and Apple Music. And we're kind of getting some play on local radio. We played our first show in December. So it's a really fun hobby that we enjoy doing.
Totally. Do you want to play a song for us?
Well, if people want to check us out, they can definitely go on Spotify, look up Club Sunday. And the first single that we released was called Don't Say It. That got some local play. So I think if people want to give that a listen, it's kind of got a lot of those 80s synth pop vibes to it.
100%. We will add it part of the link as well, Kai. Thank you. And continue to look after yourself, continue to play the band, continue to rejuvenate yourself, because I know music is amazing. It helps you to be more productive on your career or your business. But most importantly, it's important, as you rightly said, to enjoy yourself. Nice. Thank you. So we're officially entering the random rapid fire question round. There's no right or wrong answer, any random questions, Kyle. And we'll just go from there. Yeah.
Sure.
Perfect. So do you try to spend time at night without your phone?
Oh, try, usually fail, but I do try.
Right. Do you have a sleep app or something that you track your sleep, or you just keep the switch off the phone whenever you can and then you sleep?
I used to have an Aura ring that I track sleep with, and then it stopped working and I never replaced it. So now I just try to, go to bed at a reasonable time. I know it's not good, but I do look at my phone as I'm going to sleep, but it's usually watching like Bob Ross on YouTube or something very relaxing.
Right.
Sometimes listening to like meditation music, doing a little bit of like yoga or meditation can help. Reading is really good, but yeah, I mean, it's generally not a good thing to look at your phone going to sleep, but I do it.
Totally. I think we all do that, and it's important to kind of reduce it as much as we can. That's nice. So, do you have a favorite sports? What play do you like to play if you are being called to play in Olympics?
I like any kind of pickup team sport like basketball or hockey, football, soccer. It's hard to say I have a preference. I probably would have been a good football player, but we didn't really do team sports growing up. I didn't grow up in that environment, so I never really learned whether I'd be good. But I've been told by Kevin that I have the build of a football player, so I'd probably be a good linebacker.
Nice. Have you tried it?
Oh, just pick up games in the schoolyard growing up. Nothing serious.
Totally. Right. If you could travel to any place in the world, where would you travel to?
I would love to go to Croatia because that's where my name comes from and where my great grandparents immigrated from Yugoslavia. So I'd love to go there, among many other places, but that's one.
Okay, so you haven't been there yet?
I haven't. No. I'd like to, but yeah, it's totally achievable to go there. I just haven't.
Nice. So what would be the hardest thing for you to give up?
Probably music.
Yeah. So you are the last person. There is I always get this right. There is an apocalypse. Something bad happened. What would you do? Where would you hide?
Yeah, I'd probably. Well, we have a cottage out in the country that's pretty isolated, so I might go there. But depending on how bad the apocalypse is, that might not help us.
True.
Yeah, I'd probably. I mean, COVID felt like one, didn't it? When that all first happened, it felt like the apocalypse. We just stayed inside.
Yeah, that's it. So if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you like to have?
Probably flight, I would say.
100%.
Transportation would be so much easier if you could just fly there.
So if you are that invisible flyby, where would you fly to, and what would you listen?
Oh, I would fly everywhere. I'd probably do like really boring stuff though. Like, oh, I need to get to the gym. I'll just fly there. Like I don't know if I'd use it for anything really interesting, just day to day. Or, it'd be great. Like, hey, there's a concert going on in New York this weekend. I'll just, fly down there. But I guess that's what private jets are for those who can, that's something to aspire to. If I can ever one day fly private, then that is, I guess, why they have those, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to wait in an airport for a day.
Yeah, totally. So what's the first book or the first band you remember that you really loved?
First book or band?
Both, yeah.
Well, band, I grew up on the Beatles. My dad was a big Beatles fan, and I still am. So that was really important growing up. Book, I read, I'll do like a startup book. There's a book called Lean Analytics that I read when we were starting Proposify, and it was co-written by Ben Yoskovitz, who is actually on our board and has been on our board now for 7 or 8 years. That book is really transformational for me, and just learning about SaaS and learning how to, build a startup and measure what matters and that kind of thing. So it sounds, very technical as a book, Lean Analytics, but it's very, very practical. I'd recommend any founder starting a tech company gives that a read.
Lean Analytics, totally. Thank you for that. And what's your favorite food, and what's the weirdest food that you've ever eaten?
Favorite food. Right now, I really like, like Thai food or, food like that. Weirdest food. I mean, when I tried sushi the first time, that was pretty weird. But now it's like everybody eats sushi.
Yes, tell me about it. Yeah.
I did have a chocolate chip cookie that was made with crickets before. It was delicious.
Really?
I was in an accelerator in Boston, and we were kind of, a lot of us were like living in a sort of an apartment together, basically. And there was these two young women who were doing a startup on basically using bugs for food, for like protein, very much more efficient from like a water usage, more sustainable, and like making cookies. And so they were like in there baking food all day. And they were actually later featured on like Shark Tank, I believe. Like they were fairly well known and got a lot of attention, but I actually stayed with them. And when I was in Boston, and they would like, pull cookies out of the oven. Oh, it smells delicious. You want to try it? And it was made with ground up crickets.
Yeah. Can you remember the taste? Was it chocolatey, or how was it?
It tasted like a chocolate chip cookie.
Oh, wow. Really? Wow.
You would never know that there was crickets in it.
Yes. Nobody checks the ingredients anyway.
Especially in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So I know your wife will be listening to this. So if you switch your role as your wife for a day, what would you do? Can you cook, Kyle?
Well, my wife is probably not going to listen to this. She's heard enough of me. She doesn't, usually go and listen to podcast interviews. But no, I don't. I definitely couldn't do her job, especially with. Well, my wife's a doctor as well, so I absolutely couldn't do her job.
Totally.
I think it's part of that whole opposites attract thing. I know a lot of tech entrepreneurs who marry doctors for some reason. I don't know why, but it's very much a sort of, academia. Like there's a certain personality type who becomes a doctor, and there's a very, very different personality type who becomes an entrepreneur. And,
Nice.
I don't know. I think they sometimes work well together because they're so opposite.
Well said. Nice. So you're about to get into a fight. What song come on as your soundtrack?
I get into a fight. I don't know. I always think of just like some cheesy 80s song, like Eye of the Tiger or something like that.
That's a good one. Definitely, it's a good one. So who haven't you seen or talked to in a long time, and you hope that they're doing okay?
There's a lot of people, from my community. So when I left the religious community that I grew up in, there's a strict shunning policy. Not to get too heavy on you here, but there's a lot of people that I grew up with that I completely lost contact with, because once you leave that religious community, they're never to speak to you again. So I actually haven't talked to my mother or my sister in years since leaving.
Sorry to hear that. And then I'm sure things will fall in place, Kyle. Yeah. People at one point realized that, relationships are more important than religion, so it's okay. I think they're I don't know. You have triggered me here.
We hope so. Yeah, we hope they come around.
Totally. So when was the last time you wrote a letter to someone?
Emails don't count, do they?
No. Handwritten
letter. I don't remember.
Yes.
Maybe when I was a kid, I used to have like a pen pal or something.
Yes.
I used to write letters to my friend who lived in Calgary, because that's where I, spent a part of my childhood. But yeah, it's probably been since childhood.
Maybe you should write one to someone.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Definitely. So the last question before we close this and move into people in your life. What do you get every time when you go for grocery shopping?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What do you get every time when you go for grocery shopping?
My weakness is potato chips.
Oh.
And there's a brand, I don't know if you guys have it where you're at, but it's called Miss Vicky's, and it's like kettle cooked chips, and they're just so good. I almost always have to get a bag when I get groceries.
I will check in UK. You'll check in UK whether we have that brand, Kyle. That's interesting. So. Yeah. Let's talk about the people in our life in the last few minutes that we have. So who are the people who have been the most influential in your life and career?
So I already shared a bit about Ben Yoskowitz being on the board at Proposify, but also, somebody I admire and respect. Kevin as well. Kevin is sort of like I lost my dad about 10 years ago. I'm sorry to keep getting heavy on you here, but my dad passed away in 2012. And Kevin and I have always had, he's always been a little bit like an older brother or a dad or an uncle to me. But yeah, either way, we're very, very bonded, and we've been building a business together for 15 years, and we're like family with each other. So I would definitely put him up there. Yeah, probably too many to mention, but I think Kevin's a big one.
And your wife and your children.
Oh yeah, of course.
Just in case she might listen, maybe 10 years later. So.
That's right. Well, I always figure it's a given with your immediate family, but yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially as my, sorry, apologize for the barking here in the background, especially as my older son, he's 15 now, he'll be 16 later this year. And your relationship with your kids changes as they become adults. They're not little kids anymore, and so you can have more grown-up conversations, and it's a really cool thing about having kids.
Nice. You already alluded it to, but let's talk. How do you define success and say happiness?
That is a great question. I think I'm reading a book right now by Marshall Goldsmith called The Earned Life. And he talks a lot about this. So if people are interested in this subject of what makes you happy and how do you find what makes you happy, I think it's a really good one. But I would say, I think we're wired to be in pursuit of an objective. Right. I think that's why we see when people retire or they lose a sense of purposeness. Is that a word?
Yeah.
So I think being in pursuit of an objective is important, but also not tying your self-worth to outcomes, because there's so many variables that you can't predict an outcome. Say our business is going to hit this in revenue or that in revenue. I mean, number one, if you hit it, you are almost always not satisfied. Or if you say like, hey, when I make $1 million or 5 million or 10 million, that's when I'll be happy. Well, if you actually hit that goal, it's really exciting for about like 2 weeks. And then you forget that it ever happened. It's just normal now. They've studied the happiness over, they've done a lot of studies on this, and they basically figure the average person is about 7 out of 10 happy. And if something really great happens, like they win the lottery or they sell their business and make millions, it goes to 10, and then it just levels out at about 7. And people who have something traumatic happen, they lose an arm, a leg, they lose a loved one. Let's say their happiness goes down to 1 or 2, and then it eventually just goes back to 7.
Nice. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's very useful.
So I think that my definition of success is, are we doing something that gives us enjoyment, that gives us meaning, that we feel like we have a sense of purpose, but we also enjoy the process. And we aren't tied to what's going to happen. Is it going to be successful? It's just, are we moving forward and are we enjoying the journey?
Yes, powerful. I know it's you kind of made it like a smooth talk, but you might have gone through a lot of challenges. Talk us through some of the things that you had to overcome in your life.
Yeah, I mean, a big one was back in 2012. That's when all happened within the same year. My father died. I realized I was raised essentially in a cult and decided to leave it. Faced shunning from immediate family and those in my community. Business was failing, the agency, and got divorced on top of that. So there was a lot of things happening at that time, but I think it made me stronger as a result.
Totally. So what does Kyle Racki want to remember for?
Well, I think I've learned that my experiences have given me some value to share with the world. especially as it relates to building businesses. I love working with founders and entrepreneurs and being able to share some of what I've learned over the years to help them. And so I try to find opportunities to do that. One of the things that I'm working on right now is kind of, something more on the personal side. So Proposify is my main business that I'm building, but I have my own personal website called KyleRacki.com that is really there to help founders, especially the ones who are in the early stages, find product market fit. So I try to just share what I learned there and on LinkedIn. If people did want to check it out, KyleRacki.com, they can sign up for my newsletter. I'll send one every Saturday with some ideas. Also kind of thinking about like a course or a coaching program or a workshop on product market fit, because it is not well understood by founders. So sharing the knowledge with the world, I think if people can remember me for that and being generous with my time, I think that would be something I'd like to have in my obituary.
Totally. I think you already have, and you have been doing it for a long time. And I'm sure you will do that even more in the coming months and years, Kyle. Thank you so much for your time. As we close the episode, is there any part of your life or career, or is there anything else you would say to the listeners?
Well, I think if you're building a startup and it's not going well and it's not easy, just remember that's normal.
Yes.
And usually the ones that keep going, it's usually just a function of how long can you last. So keep going.
Brilliant.
But if it's not working, figure out why and fix that. Don't just keep doing the same thing.
Very, very profound advice there, Kyle. Thank you so much for your time. Wish you, your family, your loved ones, and all the colleagues in Proposify all the success and happiness. Stay healthy, stay happy, stay mindful, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bachu. It was great to meet you.
Thank you. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, review, comment on Bachu Scribble Tech Leaders Podcast in your favorite podcast channels. Please do visit bachuscribble.com/Tech Leaders Podcast to listen to this episode and all the previously recorded podcast episodes. I will see you in the next podcast episode where I interview another special tech leader. Until then, it's Bhaskar Sundaram signing off.